So the story that we're going to talk about is Timo joined Cyberhaven and then over 4 quarters was able to the 4.7x DG source pipe while getting 300% more efficient. So improving pipe to spend by 300%, which is a crazy story. And I'm excited to double click. You guys smell? Does anyone smell that? You guys smell it through Zoom? I don't know. Is it just me? What's it smell like? Opportunity, baby. That's what it smells like. I got the laugh from Timo. Let's go. The opportunity today is that you get to learn from who, in my mind, is one of the smartest demand practitioners I've met, especially in the realm of I would call it tactical excellence. So the story that we're going to talk about is Timo joined Cyberhaven. Basically, marketing team of one inherited a middling demand gen function, and then over 4 quarters was able to the 4.7x DG source pipe while getting 300% more efficient. So improving pipe to spend by 300%, which is a crazy story. And I'm excited to double click.
I would not say there's anything groundbreaking what we did. It's more so kind of identifying the lowest hanging fruit, right? At the end of the day, because there's, especially as demand practitioners, you're pushed and you're probably well aware that there's 10,000 things you can do. And people always talk about the lowest hanging fruit, but sometimes the lowest hanging fruit can be the symptom. So you can't only go around fighting symptoms, right? So I don't think it's anything groundbreaking.
Totally.
A little bit of a kind of introduction. I'm Timo. I've been with Cyberhaven coming up on 2 years. Prior to this, I was over at Verkada. Verkada, I was leading their new products growth. So anything outside of their core product line, which is security cameras, I was in charge of bringing them to 50 million in lifetime bookings as fast as I can. So that includes things like access control, alarms, sensors, so on and so forth. I also did a little bit of channel marketing over there, which I think has been very helpful for my time in Cyberhaven, which, cybersecurity is notoriously channel first and channel driven. So it's been a helpful experience. And then prior to that, prior to Verkada, I was in private equity and investment banking. So kind of made a pivot about 3 years into my career and then landed in demand. That's kind of the TLDR.
Sweet. Timo, take it away. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Let me get cool. There we go. I'll just start with the 3 core problems that we identified. Kind of laying the groundwork. This is February of 2024. We actually had no one in the demand seat at that point in time. They had left the company in around November of 2023. So the engine was largely disregarded, but it had been running for about a year and a half, 2 years before. So there was still data for me to look at, which is great. So it was not a true cold start, like a 0 to 1 type problem. And identified 3 things. One is we were very overinvested in demand capture. Our short-term goals were driving short-term messaging too. A lot of requested demo, a lot of assuming that people were primed and ready to buy, aware of who we are. And I felt like that's just not a sustainable strategy at the end of the day, because all you're doing is demand capture. The second problem that we identified was a single channel reliance. This was somewhat of a misconception internally. People had identified LinkedIn as being way too expensive from a CPM basis, and people had identified that Google was way too erratic in terms of we weren't getting the right quality of people because it's keyword based, right? So it was harder for folks to restrict the quality of leads that they were getting. And then Reddit was actually something that people considered a really good CPM brand awareness play, but it was very hard to scale because you can almost never produce any leads from it. Now, the context here is we're B2B cybersecurity. Our audience is extremely cautious, to say the least, and they're very averse to traditional marketing. So what ended up happening was people gravitated towards Facebook, where it can do lead gen, and it has generally really cheap CPMs. But I would argue that it's probably a much lower conversion rate and much lower quality than some of the other channels that, when diving in, I was able to identify. So I felt like the single channel reliance, even away from the kind of philosophy of, oh, you need to be everywhere, create a surround sound, you need to see 10, 12 times for you to convert. Ignoring all of that, I just felt like the single channel reliance didn't even make sense for this to be the single channel. And then the third one is kind of a sloppy marketing and sales handoff, which I think kind of permeates almost all organizations. If the lead handoff process is really poor, if people don't know how to reach out, and if people are spending more time doing manual things than they are actually reaching out and converting leads, there's something wrong there, right? Both internally and for the buyer itself, it's a bad experience. I would say that this is again, nothing groundbreaking, but my key realization, because so many people internally were focused on visual and alignment to the brand and stuff like that, I might get flack for this down the line, but I'm very, very I don't care that much about aligning to the brand. Like I'm like very comfortable with up to a 45-degree pivot from where the brand is. Definitely not like a 90, but like, how are you going to find the next working thing if you're not willing to pivot at least a little bit from the defined brand, right? Otherwise, everything looks the same. And especially in a world of AI slop, it's going to look more and more like the same. But my key realization is like a pretty image and a catchy headline is not really going to earn our buyers' attention. You kind of have to do something else, right? You have to produce things that people care about, that like they're actually getting value from you. This starts to sound a lot more like Jordan Crawford and his like outbound strategy, but I think the same thing applies on the inbound side too. So the three-part strategy that we looked at, one was mapping target accounts and clean audiences. That's just mostly about waste, like cutting wasted spend. Demand creation, which is more about earning our audience's awareness, time, and so on and so forth. Demand capture, kind of, this is where more of that 45-degree pivot away from the brand came in. It's like, let's do stuff that's really creative, that's really like, it's going to stand out in people's minds, even if they don't ultimately convert. So it's kind of combining demand capture with things that'll resonate in people's minds and can I have lasting mind share effect. I won't go too much into kind of these individual examples, but um, I'll kind of take a pause right here. This is essentially like the TLDR of what we did. The combination of essentially investing in trimming spend and investing in the right areas is what eventually resulted in this kind of like hockey stick, right? It was 2 3 quarters of rebuild. I swear to God, if anyone assumes that a growth person can turn it around in a quarter, don't commit to it. If they're pressuring you to commit to it, run fast because they don't really know what's going on. And I think like one of the things that I like to say the most, especially when I'm talking to people who are trying to solve their growth problems, I say it in the politest way possible, but it's, hey, if you don't have product market fit, we shouldn't be talking. Like I can't fix your lack of product market fit, right? Growth is not a replacement for fit. If anything, it can actually hurt the company in the long run because you think you have product market fit, but it's really just growth hacking and pulling a bunch of growth levers. So I'll take a pause right there. I see like there's a couple of chats coming in, but
Timo, can we spend like, I don't know, super quick on the
yeah,
meat of it? The targeting with primary is interesting, and
yeah,
we can talk about
sure.
the just kind of the general about the content, the type of content that I was working, and then if you want, we could double click on like the specifics there.
No problem. I kept it really short, but happy to kind of go in more. Uh, this is aligning to the first part of the strategy, which is mapping target accounts, trimming the fat and waste and all that jazz. So Primer, full disclosure, I am a customer of theirs. I've actually been a customer of theirs since Verkotted, so a company ago. And I work closely with both their founders as well as their product team to try and get a product that I would actually use. And clearly, like I've used it at multiple companies at this point. So first thing is start with research and looking at the existing audiences that we'd already created within. I kind of felt like we were a little too loose, a little bit too spray and pray. It's probably the best way to put it. So a deep research of the data security space was a starting point. Comparing what I found versus what already existed within our audiences, referring to historical closed won data. Of course, that's nothing surprising, as well as which industries reach certain stages within the sales funnel. I think the most important thing for me, I guess, going through this exercise is whether or not the closed won data is actually reflective of reality. The context here is that Cyberhaven commercialized back in 2021, but initially we were very focused on commercial accounts that were sub 1,000 in employee size. Over time, we scaled much more into kind of 5,000 under and the enterprise and then, Fortune 500 realm. The stuff that we closed back in 2021, I don't care how you slice it from an industry perspective, how you slice it from location perspective, it's probably not as relevant when you're shifting from a sub 1,000 to a above 10,000 type of a world. So being able to be selective with what is actually relevant closed won data was very important. And then the third one, which I think is one of the biggest value adds of Primer, besides the screen you're seeing on the right, is dynamic exclusions based on your CRM. So if someone actually flipped to an active opportunity or someone was marked by a sales rep as competitor, they will automatically get pulled in. You can set up your exclusion list that live, breathe, update across the various ad channels. And my personal approach, especially when you're learning a business for the first time or stepping in a new role, is definitely emphasize exclusions more than the inclusions. It's very easy to say, like, I know exactly who I want to go after, but 9 times out of 10, like, you might be excluding someone that you really shouldn't be excluding. So rather than saying, I know what I want, I tend to go, I know what I don't want. And the screenshot on the right here shows kind of like, I'll zoom in a little bit, but it shows a little bit of this kind of input and output style that I've worked with the Primer team to kind of develop. On the left side is your traditional criteria filtering. On the right side is kind of the summary and the preview, high level of what exactly you're getting, right? The nice thing is I was really frustrated personally when I had to work with other audience tools where you push it into LinkedIn, then you go into LinkedIn, then you look at the audience insights, and you're like, oh my God, what a disaster this audience is. This is completely misaligned with what I'm looking for. So being able to see everything at an aggregate summary level was very, very important. If I then saw, for example, I included Asia, right? I like included Asia for some reason, and randomly I see that companies by location towards the bottom has North Korea. Nothing against them, but we don't sell into North Korea for sure. Being able to immediately see at a glance, and you can't see it in the UI over here, but if I were to hover over and click around the kind of 20% mark, there'd be a little Rex bar across that shows up that says like, hey, actually, I want to exclude this. So being able to say like, let's work with the inputs and also exclude based off of the outputs and summaries that I'm seeing was actually something that allowed us to iterate and preserve the quality of our audience really quickly.
Yeah, this is great. I think the high level takeaways, and when you joined, you had a bunch of levers you could pull, especially to improve efficiency as you started. And like it seems like one of the easiest levers you had was just like cutting waste
Yeah,
and
we just got to
targeting
boost
because
ROI.
you were exactly because you're I mean you guys were relying on basically native targeting and like one time list uploads in Facebook, right? So like if you can improve match rates with better data and then make sure that the data actually fits your ICP, that's like easily like such a high leverage.
Yeah,
And then it saves you a bunch of time with the dynamic audience updates and exclusions and all that.
exactly.
Which is no fun.
Exactly what I was going to go to, which is like I wouldn't have to, I would not want to have to do manual exclusion lists every week or whatever it might be.
Okay, so this is the first step is like cleaning up targeting, and then you guys were heavily over invested on what we would not even demand capture, just like demo request messaging and
Yeah.
ads. So then you decided to like start building trust with the audience by doing demand creation campaigns, really high quality content, and then
Yep.
demand capture.
Exactly. Cool. And I'll caveat this by saying like webinars and downloadable content might not work for every single person, right? It also varies from industry to industry and also varies by stage, right? If you're a very well-established company, like webinars maybe isn't as relevant. I don't know, because people are already educated on the market at that point. People might already know where you are. The purpose of a webinar is to accelerate you through the marketing funnel. But we did do a lot of webinars focused on bringing industry experts into the space. In this case, we have the former CISO of Palo Alto Networks. In another case, we had one of the early engineers from CrowdStrike that we were able to bring on. That's a lot of just reaching through the network and finding people who others might want to listen to. And then for us, document ads were really effective, mostly because I feel like people being able to give a preview helps earn the trust and make sure that people aren't wasting their times. So I typically like to give at least 3 pages, if not 5. And at least within the first 3, I like a sexy graph like page, even though I'm contradicting my earlier statement, but I want to make it somewhat sexy on the front page. I want to have like a summary of what you're going to get outside of the doc. And then the third slide, I always like it to be a table of contents overview. And then fourth and fifth tend to be a preview of chapter 1 or topic 1. So people know what to get, the tone to expect and the quality of writing. And then I'll quickly go through kind of the demand capture motion, which is even like the ones on the left and the right are very standard gift card ads. Excuse me. The one in the center, which is a paintball gun. We've also done flamethrowers in the past. These are ones that are very much intended to be like, hey, even if you don't convert on it, it's something that might stick out in your memory. You're like, hey, you guys are the paintball guys, right? Or you guys are the flamethrower guys, right? We had people coming up to us as conferences, remembering our ads and asking if we're still giving them out. And I was like, no, it was like a limited run, but like at least it's stuck on your mind enough for you to find us at RSA or Black Hat or whatever it might be. So those are cool little kind of demand capture that also functions as, capturing mind share and demand generation.
Yeah, no
Anything
one's
else you
coming
want
up
to
at a
dive into?
conference. No one's coming up at a conference and being like, "Hey, you're the guys who offered us AirPods."
No, most likely not.
You still offer AirPods? What was the down funnel impact on the leads that converted from the gift card offer specifically? If you have any specific numbers, or you can just speak to like because there's an objection that comes up a lot. It's like we're incentivizing them; they're gonna be shitty leads. Like, speak to that for a second. Would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I'll start with the top of funnel, right? The top of funnel for our industry, we were seeing CPLs of about, and this is after layers of retargeting. So there's actually more embedded hidden costs, right? If you include the retargeting original cold campaign, we were seeing about 850 to 1200 cost per lead for a traditional, like, hey, here's a console, here's a product image, here's a graphic diagram, whatever of the product for a demo lead without any incentives. So 850 to 1200. With incentive ads, our average after retargeting all that jazz was initially around 150. and then it would climb up and creep up over time. Obviously, as saturation, as low hanging fruit kind of runs out, but we'd almost always plateau around 600, give or take. So having it, right, for a $50 gift card, or I typically don't do more than 50. The reason being is that once you go over 50 for gift card value, it's at least during my A/B testing, completely skews the quality of audience or leads that you're getting. 25, 50, I think that's like a comfortable range where it's like a sweetener enough to get people over the line, but not so much that you're going to get a bunch of gift card hunters is probably the best way to put it. And then in terms of after they get the meeting booked, completely correct. We would see like the meeting booked to, sales accepted opportunity. That conversion rate historically for us has hovered around 55%. With incentive ads, it tends to be more around 30, right? So it is like a meaningful quality drop. But when you're looking at starting at 150 and CPL stabilizing at 600, and then for the regular ads without any incentives starting at 850 and then plateauing around 1200, it's actually roughly the same math, right? Like from a conversion rate perspective and cost that's related to it, because you're starting so much lower in price.
And you also get sorry, I mean,
Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say you also get the added benefit of like a really high quality prospect now understands deeply what your product does, having more volume if it's the right people for less cost. Like I would take that over more efficiency but more expensive, just because you get more eyeballs on your product and those people are gonna like understand what you do, share with friends, etc. And you'll have
And
that relationship over time.
it's important to note that we were in a very much like awareness and brand building time, right? Where it's like people weren't aware of us. And I don't care if the CISO of Rockwell Automation for some reason wants a $50 gift card. If they're on the call, we have time with Rockwell. We should 100% pursue that, right? Even if it doesn't turn into an opportunity that very moment, at least there's that touch point, right? And there's something that we gave our sales team a chance at goal. And if our market is, if only 5% of our buyers are in market at any point in time, I can't expect that I'm only going to capture that 5% perfectly every single time, right? And if anyone's telling you that they can, shout out 6 cents, it probably they're lying. But sorry, that's a
Yeah,
slight
that makes
bias
sense.
there.
What, just real quick, the audiences for those gift card ads, is that just like people at who fit your ICP audience who are warm, engaged, like website visitors, ad engagers, etc.?
Great question. Yeah. So typically I would do them at like the retargeting layer. That way they're at least aware and they've interacted with other content, right? We have tested it by going purely cold. Generally does actually yield even lower CPLs, but like lower quality and lower conversion rates from meeting into sales accepted opportunity, right? Because those people are much more likely to be actual gift hunters. The difference is that by not having retargeting layered on top, you're going to have a broader audience to go after. And so if you've honed in your audiences and you've trimmed a lot of the fat, the garbage, it's actually not a bad play to do every now and then, flood the kind of, build the essential database with good quality leads that you can then reach out and get later on. What we actually saw is after running some of our crazier, quote unquote, incentive campaigns, we had deals that were coming back around, mentioning in the transcripts, like reviving 9 months, 12 months, 14 months down the line. We still have people who are re-engaging with us like now a year and a half after they interacted with one of our crazier incentive ads, being like, I still remember you guys. Now, interestingly enough, that does tend to happen with the more crazier giveaways as opposed to, the $50 gift card, because it's so saturated a market where everyone's doing $50 gift cards, right? That's kind of part of that demand capture, but with also like capturing mind share and memory and some sort of like a emotional reaction.
I thought that was genius what you guys did. It's just like a way to be different instead of better, and it's the cost the same
I
as like
think
a
our
boring
vendor was
$50
literally
gift
looking
card.
at us like, "Are you sure this is legal?" I was like, "I'm pretty sure it's legal." And then to do a little bit of research, and they're like, "This might be the craziest production we've ever done." And I was like, "Yeah, it's probably one of the crazier ones." The other thing is, I think
Jimmy asked how many flamethrowers did you
we ended up
did you
doing
ship you a number?
30. We did 30, but it was like very high value. And some of them were, it was kind of like a word of mouth thing. We did like a small batch of 10. And then I honestly didn't think it would work, to be completely frank with y'all. Like initially when I was doing it, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. And then it took off way more than I expected it to. So we ended up doing 30. And then the debate was whether or not we wanted to do more. But at that point in time, it was like, okay, every single one I have to send out a liability waiver for through DocuSign. And also, like, what happens if someone does actually accidentally burn their house down? Like, not a good look for us. We ultimately stopped at 30.
I had a question about sizes of audiences, so cold and retargeting, and then what was your methodology for once you have that overall audience deciding allocation of budget? So like how do you decide how much to allocate to demand creation versus these demand capture stuff?
Rough sizes of cold retargeting, I would say right now we start around 50K. And then for layer one of retargeting, aka to interact with some of our cold ads, it hovers around 10 to 15K. So we have pretty high penetration actually into our cold audience.
And that's
And then
just
from,
people.
I'm sorry?
That's people,
Yeah, people. And
which you
then
built into primer audiences.
so primer audience sits at 50,000 at the very top, the cold audience. And that's like
Uh-huh.
people who I want to make sure that I'm showing the right message to. And
Okay.
then those who interact with the top of funnel ads, which tend to be like, much more brand awareness driven, website driven, click through driven, right? Then those people get built into a retargeting one, or what you would consider like, they're aware of us and they know who we are, they've interacted. That audience tends to be more 15,000, and it's like retargeting audiences from website, video views, your classic kind of click downloads, all that jazz. And then we have retargeting two, which is, hey, if you've interacted with any of our content on retargeting one, and that tends to be heavily comprised of on-demand webinars and document ads. I'm personally a big fan of document ads. Then we put you in retargeting two. Now, retargeting two is generally a relatively small audience between 2 to 4,000. And that's where a lot of our, actual demo ads will be coming from. If you want to scale up, I mean, the way that that's set up means that if you want to put more budget into the top, it actually has a flow through effect to all of them, right? But if you're only putting effort into or budget into retargeting two, you're probably not going to get increased efficiencies from just showing the same demo ad to the same person 20 more times. So it actually turns it into more of a coherent system where, and that I think ties into how do you allocate the budget between all of them, right? I tend to allocate the budget heavily towards the top of funnel, which I think is abnormal for most people. It's essentially like 40% of our budget goes towards the top, but the reason being is that it flows through into the mid funnel where we're building the retargeting audience, right? And then about another 40% or so goes straight into the mid funnel to generate more document ads, more awareness, try to build that bottom of funnel. Because the bottom of funnel, we know we convert very well. If you've been interacting along the way, like it converts very well, but throwing 10x more dollars into the same 2,000, 3,000 audience, it's probably not going to yield much results for you, right? But it's like an integrated system. We've also tested in the past where I was told from the top down, we need to cut our brand awareness spend. This doesn't make any sense. So we dropped it from 40% to I think 20% or something like that within a quarter. Completely nuked our pipeline. Like it was to a point where I was like, I didn't run the ship. Like don't look at me. Like I was very against this decision.
Right.
For me, because I had this 3-layer kind of retargeting setup, I was looking at the retargeting audience and I was like, okay, well, 1 month into the quarter, the retargeting layer two, which is a 30-day look back for high intent, I see the numbers start to come down. I was like, okay, well, it's a leading indicator. And then by the 60-day mark, which is what our look back for the retargeting first layer is, so 2 months into the quarter, I start to see that declining. And I'm like, well, the double leading indicators are there. I'm very worried for this quarter and especially more so for the next quarter. So that's where I started seeing like, hey, we need to turn something around here. Otherwise, the writing's on the wall.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a bunch of sense. Do you have in those audiences, like, do you have a methodology to get to uh, the budget? The leadership is asking you how much to spend. Like, do you start with the 50K and you're like, this is our audience penetration and the frequency we want to hit and our CPMs, and based on that, here's how I get to budget? Or do you get
Yeah,
budget and then you're like, here's how many accounts I can hit, so I'm going to build an audience that like hits
it's evolved a
that
little bit over
size?
time for sure. Because like I think previously we weren't doing as much like ABM, so it's not like a hey, here's input is the number of accounts and we want to
Right.
allocate X number of dollars to it. It was more so, hey, after building the audience within Primer or like seeing what else other tools we might want to use, but typically Primer, I would say, okay, well, what's the average expected penetration into this account? What's the frequency we're comfortable with over a period of time? And that's kind of where you're deriving a lot of the budget metrics. I'm actually perfectly comfortable, and this is maybe a reflection of us being such a like early stage startup and me doing everything at that point in time. I was not holding myself strict to 40, 40, 20 or anything like that. If I felt like, hey, we were seeing declining efficiencies at the bottom, well, that's fine. Pouring more budget there is not going to solve an efficiency problem. If anything, you're just going to inflate the denominator more. I was more than happy to kind of similar with the branding of 45-degree fluidity. I'm fine with increasing budget to the top of funnel or the retargeting layer one if I felt like we were sustaining the right click-through rates, building the retargeting audience, reaching new people, and increasing penetration. Because I was confident that we were doing the right things, even if the results in the short term were not backing it up. And as we kind of saw with the graph that I showed earlier, it was like 1, 2, 3 quarters of build, and then boom, things started like taking off, right? But if there's no demand that you've created, there's no demand you can capture.